Good evening, Resistors. Today is July 5th, 2011, and you are tuned in to the WideShut webcast on Resistance Radio. That's wideshut.co.uk and resistradio.com. As always, I'm your host, Keelan Balderson, and there's quite a bit to get into tonight. Perhaps in some other forms of media, like sports reporting or music journalism, having a lot to get into is a good thing. Unfortunately, at Resistance Radio, we like to get into the deep political issues that really affect our lives. So when there's a lot to talk about, generally that means there's a lot of dodgy things going on in the world that have implications on our freedom. But before we get all to that, can I have a customary mic check, please? Because I know last week there was some problems with the choppiness. Hopefully we can go through tonight's show without any mishaps. So just drop me a quick message in the chat to let me know that everything is loud and clear and we can get this show on the road. But of course there's always that delay as well. Shoestring budgets here at Resistance Radio. All good now. Yep, loud and clear, loud and clear, loud and clear. Yeah, so I just mentioned deep politics, and when I say deep politics, I mean the agendas and trends that surpass left-wing or right-wing politics. It's just two wings on the same bird, folks. Not everything is Labour or Conservative or Republican and Democrat. Left-wing and right-wing politicians both support the invasion of Libya. Innocent people, including children, have been murdered. All the major parties in Britain are for cuts and austerity measures, forcing the people into debt slavery to the bankers. It doesn't matter who you vote. You know, the only difference with Labour is that they say they'll make the cuts a bit more slower. But they're all happy to sell you as collateral to private banking interests on debt that they shouldn't have been making in our names in the first place. All major parties in this country also happen to be pro-EU, taking our democracy and tying it up in red tape and putting it in the hands of bureaucrats we've never heard of, like Herman Van Rompuy. And this deep political agenda that goes beyond the left-right paradigm is common to the New World Order. And if you dispute that, or you're new to the show and you've never heard that term before or heard it explained before, just go to wideshut.co.uk and click on the What is the New World Order link, and you'll see a whole list of British and American politicians talking about the New World Order from both sides of the political spectrum. The wealthy and powerful people in this world do not believe in nation states or in personal freedom. They believe that the whole world should be under their corrupt banking systems, and they believe that the markets in this world should be carved up between their corporate cartels. Why are they called transnational corporations? British Petroleum has got nothing to do with Britain. Why do we have a World Bank? Because and democracy and freedom no longer cut it with these people. They want it all. You've got oil, we'll make a reason to invade. Oh, you haven't had a World Bank loan yet. We'll find a way to bankrupt you and force that loan onto you with our stipulations, commonly population reduction measures. It's all the same agenda. Cameron, Clegg, Miliband, they're all the same. They're all members of the Banking and Globalization Party, the one-party state. All these other little labels that they like to throw out there on TV are just to keep everybody distracted. So, if you want to know how the New World Order agenda is manifesting itself this week, then let's get to the headlines. And the first headline today is, even Miliband opposes strikes. It's a one-party state. And I'll paste that link into the chat if you want to read along with me. And that's exactly my point. If any of the politicians supported the people, then they would be supporting these massive public sector strikes. They're supposed to represent the will of the people. Well, guess what? None of the three main parties support your right to protest. They don't support these recent strikes. So who do they really support? Who do they really represent? Well, it's quite clear. They're corporate financial overlords. So let's get into this article. More British citizens are coming to the realization that no matter what party they turn to, politicians do not have the people's best interests at heart. As Labour leader Ed Miliband comes out and declares the strikes a mistake and a sign of failure, the unions are finding out the hard way that even Labour are puppets of the bankers and ruling elite. And I cast my mind back to the other big protest this year in March, the March 26th thing. And in that video, because Resistance Radio went there, in that video, you can find it on my channel, I was walking from the stage at Hyde Park, and I panned the camera around, and I said, look over there. That's the controlled opposition stage. And it was where all the unions and all the Labour supporters, they were all congregating to protest the cuts. Most of them don't understand where the cuts are where they come from and the reason for them. But they were there with the unions and Labour protesting the cuts. And the Labour leaders got up there, read their scripts, giving all their NLP hands. Well, it's probably not NLP, but you know that they know exactly. They're taught exactly how to move and how to say things and body language and all that crap. They were up there talking their rubbish, and they fooled those people into thinking that they were the answer to the cuts. Well, fast forward a few months, and Miliband no longer supports those same people. Why is that? Because Miliband, like every other party leader, is just a sock puppet of the financial and corporate lobbyists. And it just so happens that it's the financial and corporate lobbyists that want your money and your labour. And they want your labour at the cheapest cost. And in order to get that, they pay him lots of money. The only answer to these cuts, the only real answer, is to default on the debt, on the national debt, on the deficit. Tell the banks to stick it, and then implement some kind of debt-free money system. And that's quite a complex issue. I've done shows on that before. I've got videos that explain the debt-free money systems and the current system that we have on my YouTube channel. I've got a couple of links here. What is money? That's one of the videos that you'll find on my channel. Oh, it's not pasting, screw it. But just go on my YouTube channel and type in what is money, and then there's another one called debt-free money and full reserve banking. Just Google fractional reserve banking, and you'll get a whole list of reading material. But the only real answer is to take the private interest's ability to create thin air. Because if you create the money, you can control people's lives down to a loaf of bread. And moving on to our next headline today, somebody who also gets a lot of our money through taxation just like the bankers, is Prince Charles. And he too seems to have the ear of our politicians more and more. Prince Charles wouldn't meddle in politics, would he? Although Prince Charles has a long history of meddling with the people's affairs, having attended the secretive Bilderberg meeting in the past. Yeah, but of course, the BBC says that anyone who believes in the Bilderberg Club are mentally ill, and that it's all just a supper club. But Charles is also a frontman, but most recently he's been rumbled meeting with coalition ministers behind closed doors and using freedom of information privileges to hide it from the democratic public. The Prince of Wales, whose cost to taxpayers rose by 17.9% last year. Yeah, as our standard of living goes down, theirs goes up. The Queen's been asking for more money. She asked for more money last year. A headline came out today that Mr. Brit posted, I think, where she's asking for more money again. Well, we're facing these austerity measures. It's a joke. Charles is required to remain politically neutral, although this can never be scrutinised because of freedom of information legislation passed by the previous Labour government exempts him from revealing any contact he has with state officials. So he's not allowed to be political, but he doesn't have to tell anybody if he's met with any politicians. However, this is not a party politics issue. It just so happens that this year he met with Chancellor George Osborne, the Education Secretary Michael Gove, and the Environment Secretary Caroline Spellman, all of the coalition government. So unless they repeal the legislation, we can assume all major parties include Prince Charles in their closed-door agendas. In total, he has had 9 private meetings with government ministers this year, giving him potential influence over the economy, your child's education, and the environment, the one topic he's never remained quiet about. Earlier this year, he attacked climate deniers again, calling for the Green movement to push propaganda that it's cool to have less stuff. I wonder if he's given up any of his stuff recently. Let's not forget, this Prince Charles bloke also happens to be the elitist twat that came out and told everybody to take less baths. The lowly peasants are only allowed this much water in their bath, according to Prince Charles. This guy gets ferried about in giant Rolls Royces all day. The royals probably have one of the biggest, if not the biggest, carbon footprint of, somebody alive, somebody going about their daily business. Obviously, oil companies or whatever have more, but what I'm saying is somebody just living and, their daily lifestyle, they have a far bigger carbon footprint than anybody. So, to tell us to, live our lives with less is kind of the joke of the century. Yeah, somebody just posted in the chat, Prince Charles does run his car on wine. He happens to run his prized Aston Martin on wine. Unfortunately, not all of us can afford wine or Aston Martins. But where was I going with this? Members of the public have to ask themselves, what right does an unelected elite have to schmooze with our politicians? Does simply being born into the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha family give him power over you or me? So there you have it. Prince Charles using his birthright to push his own political agenda in secret. And if you want to know more about the royals, just go back through the archive around the time of the royal wedding, when the Resistance radio crew were about the only people in London that day actually speaking any sense. I mean, the was almost like it really was a matrix, some kind of parallel universe. We were walking around just like, oh, looking at all these zombies waving their flags, having no idea about anything in the world. Or if they did, they were quite happily turning off their critical thinking skills so they could bask in the glory of Wills and Kate and Wills. Those two disgusting creatures that are now in Canada getting protested, because obviously if some of us don't want the Queen, it's pretty sure that the Canadians don't want this Queen that only visits them every, couple of friggin' years or whatever. But they're still classed as their monarchy. But just to lay some points out again, firstly, the money that we think comes from them doesn't cover all the costs that we give them anyway. Our tax money is far more than the money that they generate, or what we think they generate, put it that way. Secondly, the money we think comes from them actually comes from the Crown Estate, and technically isn't even their money to begin with, and if we kick them out, we could still generate that same money. In fact, we could probably make more, because we could do tours of their dingy old castles and palaces, fully open it all up to the public, to laugh at these strange creatures that live in these ridiculous, lavish palaces and whatnot. So really, no matter how you spin it, the royal family are just a parasite on the people of this country. They don't make us any money. And quite frankly, they represent the polar opposite of what free. Look at their history. Look at their bloody empire. It's 2011 and we still have a monarchy. It's ridiculous. But as I said, thankfully, there are some people that are awake to that. When the Queen visited Ireland, they obviously protested her. As I said, William and Kate in Canada, they've been protested. They don't really show us that on the news, but we know it's been happening from more localized reports. Resistance Radio tried to protest them. Everybody else was arrested before they could even get there, which is kind of ironic when they're not supposed to be political in any way, yet they can come up with pre-crime laws out of the blue to arrest everybody when they're having a wedding. Ridiculous. But we'll move on, because there is quite a few stories I want to today, and it all ties in together anyway. Another element, another tool that the power elite use to help expand their corporate and financial empires is, of course, the war on terror. And in our current power structure, we basically have three factions that are working together: Britain, America, and Israel. Historically, it was more of a Anglo-American power structure, with the CFR and the Royal Institute of International Affairs set up to promote global government and the New World Order. And as the state of Israel was helped into being by these elite, it's obviously now flourished and become an integral part of the power structure. Some would argue the integral power structure. I would definitely agree in regard to the military-industrial complex that they have a big role to play. And of course, these same elite also helped build the European Union through the Bilderberg Group. It was leaked only a year or so ago, the minutes that showed that members of the early Bilderberg meetings were developing the European Union. And then Etienne Davignon came out and admitted that they also created the euro currency. And really, the EU is just one tool for globalization as a whole. Obviously, the North American Union is now racing ahead. What's my point? Where am I going with this? Well, today the power structure is probably more accurately described as a Euro-American Israeli establishment rather than the old Anglo-American establishment. It still really, in my eyes, is an Anglo-American driven conspiracy. But again, that doesn't even matter because they're obviously not working for the interests of the average people that live in America, Israel, or Britain. They're basically hiding behind those labels and getting everything they want from behind closed doors. And then we all into fight and whatnot. But back to my point, the war on terror perpetrated by this power system is a fraud. It's a tool being used so they can have full spectrum dominance of the Middle East. It's the pretext that allows them to swallow the Middle East into the Euro-American Israeli system. The corporations are now over there. The banks are now. Obviously, the military are now over there. We're taking their resources, their oil, their opium, so the intelligence agencies can fund more black ops. The CIA are the biggest drug runners in the world. And all of this goes back to 9/11 and to a smaller extent 7/7. 7/7 helped propagandize the British people a little bit more. You know, it's all right seeing 9/11 on telly, but until it happened to us, we weren't as emotionally committed to the war on terror. And the CIA funded the Mujahideen, obviously, in the 70s through the 80s to prevent Russia from becoming the dominant power. But they left behind this stirred-up hornet's of Islamic fundamentalism. They then came up with the fake Al-Qaeda buzzword, which really developed out of an intranet system, a database system used by the Mujahideen. And then, obviously, 9/11 happened. Whether that was full-blown inside job or elements really did want to attack America and they helped them along the way and provocateured them, I don't think the finer details are completely known. But there obviously was inside involvement if you dig into that. And then they used their sock puppet media to blame 9/11 on the fake Al-Qaeda. And then they just say, whenever they want to invade somewhere else, oh, Al-Qaeda, terrorists, and the public are just happy, even though there's no evidence. And the empire just keeps trudging along. But it's not a loving empire. This isn't a utopia. It's fascism. It's dictatorial. So while they pretend to be spreading freedom to the Middle East, they're taking our freedom away at home at the same time. We get naked body scanners. We get CCTV on every corner. We get pre-crime arrests, violence by police on peaceful protesters, all while our politicians are talking about how the other countries need to demonstrate peaceful protesting. The war on terror is a war on freedom at home and overseas. And again, I'm rambling, but what I was trying to do is segue that into the next headline. EDL officially announces ties to Zionist State of Israel. Although many people have had their suspicions that the English Defence League are in cahoots with the Zionist State of Israel, both being vehemently anti-Muslim, a recent statement by EDL chief Tommy Robinson leaves no doubt as to the organisation's stance. In the context of being accused as Nazis, Robinson wrote, "The English Defence League was formed 2 years ago. One of the fundamental beliefs that this movement was built on was its support for Israel's right to defend itself. In our first demonstrations, we went to Birmingham and we flew the flag of Israel, the Star of David. In the first public speech I ever gave, I wore the Star of David in Leeds. The reason for this is because Israel is a shining star of democracy. If Israel falls, we all fall. This is what our movement has been built on for 2 years." So why is this happening? Well, remember, we've got Israel, Britain and America fighting a phony war on terror that they helped to create, to expand their empire into the Middle East. Now, the EDL are supposed to be a British nationalist movement. What better way to ensure that the globalist agenda continues than to create a fake nationalist movement like the EDL to make nationalism itself look stupid and to help propagate the war on terror? You know, a real nationalist movement wouldn't go along with Israel or this globalist agenda, would they? They would be opposed to supporting Israel. They would be opposed to globalization. But what's been done is the fear and prejudice of Muslims has been wrapped up in the Union Jack, the Union Jack, the flag, and it's been labelled as nationalism. So while these skinhead morons think that they're protecting Britain from the evil Muslim invasion, what they're really doing is legitimizing the war on terror and allowing the elite to continue their agenda, which ultimately leaves them and Britain worse off as we get swallowed up by this global fascism. The only radical Muslims in this country are the ones they allow into this country for their own agenda, for this very reason, to create divide and conquer situations. So I'll just read out the article. It is now clear that the EDL are a tool of the Anglo-American Israeli establishment in their quest for full-spectrum dominance of the Middle East. Of course, it's unfair to tar everybody in the organisation with the same brush. They are likely an eclectic group. Some, no doubt, are just football hooligans and racists. Others might be working class who see the rise of Muslim immigration as an infringement on their opportunities. But what the majority of EDL members do share is a hatred for extreme Islam and Muslim terrorists. EDL gatherings will often include chants about the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. It suits the establishment to promote a worldview where the terrorists are out to get us and are taking over Europe because it supports their illegal wars of aggression overseas. And it's not just an EDL problem. The majority of the British public have also been duped by the war on terror. It's just the EDL decided to take action. In a certain context, that might even be honourable. However, the reality of the war on terror is very different from what the average citizen or EDL member believes. At the very least, the 9/11 attacks had some kind of US and Israeli involvement. Of course, we all remember the 5 dancing Israelis that were caught documenting and videoing the collapse of the Twin Towers and Building 7, high-fiving each other, you know, in a state of jubilation that this was happening. And then they went on television. It was either Dutch television or actual Israeli television. And they admitted that they were there to document the event. And there was other Israeli involvement, you know, Mossad agents living next door to some of the alleged hijackers. I also remember stories of bombs being found in vans. Wayne Madsen did some coverage of how certain Israelis were allowed to fly out of the country, out of America, when there was a flight ban on everybody else. But I'll read on. It most certainly had nothing to do with bin Laden. And bin Laden obviously denied it. He came out and denied that he was involved in the attacks. The FBI admits that there's no hard evidence for bin Laden. That's why he was never indicted. And of course, the videotape that was translated incorrectly, where any admission that he made was basically just the Americans going, oh, we'll just type in that that's what he said, when it was all bollocks. Because independent Islamic and Arabic scholars translated it and said, hang on, he didn't admit anything here. So it had nothing to do with bin Laden. And for the 7/7 bombings to take place with so much prior knowledge and intelligence assets on the periphery, one can only deduce that they were allowed, if not encouraged, to happen. I wonder if the EDL are familiar with fake Al-Qaeda leader Adam Gaddan, the grandson of former Jewish Anti-Defamation League director. Or that Omar Bakri, the godfather of extremist Islam in Britain, was allowed to operate with impunity and worked with the government when NATO was bombing the Balkans. You see, when extreme Islam supports their agenda, they'll fund and back them as a rogue army that they control, and then when they want to invade other countries, they say that this same rogue army that they helped create is in that country causing trouble, and now we have to go stop them. And now we're back in Libya supporting Al-Qaeda to fight Gaddafi's forces. It's a big joke, and people don't even care anymore. As to the grand irony of it all, the charade of the war on terror is as much a war on England as it is on Afghanistan or Iraq or any other country we've invaded. Allowing young soldiers to die while taking over countries so the corporate cartels can expand their empire gives further control and power to those at the top and worsens the living conditions of those at the bottom, those in the EDL. How is supporting the expansion of a globalized world order defending the English and the sovereignty of this country? If the EDL were fighting for our freedom, they would be fighting to remove naked body scanners from airport, to repeal draconian anti-terror laws, to take down the hordes of CCTV, and to remove the bankers that help plunge the economy. Furthermore, how is supporting a nation that continually breaks international law, houses a devastating arsenal of nuclear weapons, and that represses an entire society, a quest for freedom and democracy? Not only does the Israel lobby exert influence over the mainstream parties, with the groups like Labour Friends of Israel, Conservative Friends of Israel, and Lib Dem Friends of Israel, and the Britain-Israeli Communications and Research Centre, but ironically, our nationalist thugs are now also officially tied to Israel. Some nationalists, they are. Perhaps the EDL are fascist after all. Not fascist in the sense of nationalism, but fascist in the sense of globalism. And then, of course, you get all the lefties and the uni kids joining Unite Against Fascism, and they run around claiming that the EDL are Nazis, when the Nazis were actually socialists and left-wingers. But what I'm saying is, we divide and conquer nonsense while the same agenda continues. You know, if the UAF were against fascism, then they'd attack the bankers. If the EDL were really protecting Britain, then they'd be attacking the bankers. They're just pawns on the elite chessboard. And on that note, I'm going to go to a quick song so I can have a drink and gather some more notes. So I'll be back after this quick break. Okay, we're back on the WideShut. Me, Keelan Balderson, and what a surprise that weed was brought up in the chat there. But yeah, Rastafarians actually use weed as a way of solving societal problems, or as far as my knowledge is aware of, that they would smoke it to, have discussions and come to conclusions. I mean, if all of our politicians sat down and smoked weed, I don't think we'd be invading Libya right now. So, they were awake long before we were. But I mentioned earlier about how our freedom is being taken away while we claim, or they claim, to be spreading freedom overseas. And this brings me to really our final main headline today, and that's about how the police state is clamping down on us. And this is a headline that I did the other day. Government concern over bail ruling is smokescreen to clamp down. It was announced yesterday that if the government didn't enact emergency legislation following a judge's ruling on police bail conditions, thousands of violent and dangerous people could be left wandering the streets. It turns out this is a lot of hype over something that could mean more justice, not less. A district judge at Salford Magistrates Court made a ruling that was backed by the High Court, stating that it is unfair to bail a suspect for a long period of time, only to call them back for more questioning or to charge them without providing any new evidence. Bail is put on somebody who the police have a strong hunch or some suspicion carried out an offence in order to give them time to obtain evidence needed to charge them. After all, if there was strong enough reason, then evidence should be obtainable. And in most cases, the fact that it is thought evidence can be reasonably obtained factors into the initial arrest of the suspect. Once that evidence has been obtained, the individual is then charged. The High Court ruling is to prevent police arresting people with no reasonable possibility of obtaining more evidence, bailing them for 5 months, not finding any more evidence, and dragging them back in for more questioning without charge. If they are charged the second time around, then it demonstrates that the police should have charged them to begin with. As reported by The Guardian, the ruling concerned the case of Paul Hookaway, a murder suspect who was released on bail. Hookaway was first arrested at 12:40 p.m. on 7th of November last year. A superintendent granted permission for him to be detained for up to 36 hours for questioning, but he was released on bail after 8 hours. 5 months later, on 5th of April, police applied to the courts to extend the period of detention from 36 hours to the maximum of 96, but the judge refused the application, saying the 96 hours had expired months ago. There are cases every day where innocent people are arrested with no evidence and continually cycled through the bail system when no evidence can be found. This ruling allows justice for those people. Innocent until proven guilty is not just a nice saying, it is the foundation of the justice system. However, the government and mainstream media have whipped this up into a frenzy where the public believe rapists are being released to come and get them. Home Secretary Theresa May said, "We are very conscious of the concerns that this judgment has brought in terms of operational policing." But by releasing suspects to the public on bail, it puts the public in danger anyway, especially if police could have charged them to begin with. The only people being released under this ruling are those that there is no evidence against. Under the current system, if somebody is released because there is no evidence, but later evidence is obtained, there is nothing stopping the police rearresting the suspect and charging them. Somebody on bail can just as easily do a runner as somebody who is released but still being investigated. Yet despite these undeniable truths, the Home Secretary has still suggested that emergency legislation could be written in order to usurp this ruling and likely allow police to abuse their powers even further. There may be opportunities for appealing against this decision. We are also looking at whether or not it is necessary to introduce legislation in order to deal with it, May said. In this time of draconian police action has demonstrably been ramped up. It was May and the Met Police who suggested banning people's right to protest. Police were given extra powers to remove masked individuals so intelligence teams could document who attended protests. And they were allowed to trawl social networking sites to prepare for and prevent protests. We also saw the emergence of pre-crime arrests, where several activists were arrested before even starting their protests at the royal wedding. This could well be an example of problem-reaction-solution, where the agenda always was about enshrining the act of indefinite bail. A false problem is created that the media scare everybody with, so when the solution of legislation is presented, the public accept it, when in reality it takes away more of their freedoms. And this particular story really is laughable, even to the people within within law. I remember watching the Channel 4 News last week when this came out, and they had a lawyer on, and he was literally laughing at the absurdity of how this whole thing was being reported, and he was baffled that it even made news. So it really does look like this is being spun so they can write some legislation that allows police to abuse bail conditions. They're not even supposed to be doing what they're trying to write this legislation for. There's such thing as innocent until proven guilty. You can't keep dragging people in and putting them on bail and then dragging them back in for more questioning when you've clearly got no case against them. But that really wraps it up for our main headlines tonight. There was a few things I was going to quickly mention. Anyone been following the phone hacking scandal, where the News of the World not only hacking into celebrities' phones for useless news headlines, I mean, who cares, but that's what drives society now, celebrity culture. But the News of the World has been hacking into celebrities' phones. They were caught hacking into politicians, and also they've been caught hacking into high-profile murder victims' phones. I can't remember the girl's name. Is it Millie Downer or Minnie Downer or something like that? Dowler. I probably should have researched this more before coming on air, but they hacked her phone and looked at her messages and even deleted messages while they were being while the case was still ongoing. They didn't even know if she was dead or still alive. And then they also did it in the case of Ian Huntley, girls that got murdered. But the thing I just wanted to bring up, which is totally surreal while watching the news, was that Hugh Grant, the actor, somehow played investigative reporter or undercover cop and recorded the News of the World admitting to phone hacking. And then on the news, they're like, and we're going to go to Hugh Grant. It's just, I don't know, it just made me laugh that Hugh Grant is somehow tied up into this. And all these different cases have had phone hackings and stuff. Is this big, some kind of big Hollywood conspiracy? We'll no doubt get some, if I can think about it, then some weirdo's already made a YouTube video about it. Hugh Grant is a serial killer for the Illuminati, and it's just ridiculous. But I just thought I'd bring that up because it was just odd to see people on the news involved in some media thing. Maybe Rupert Murdoch gave Hugh Grant a bad review on one of his films or something, and he's trying to get back at him. But yeah, that was quite odd. And I have gone the whole episode without mentioning the Charlie Veitch alternative media frenzy. But one thing I will mention is the BBC are really going to make truthers look stupid. And it's not just with the Charlie Veitch thing. Everything since then, the reaction that people have given Charlie Veitch is absolutely ridiculous. All these things, the guy's an agent, the guy blah 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 blah, and you've got old women coming out on YouTube shouting in megaphones that Charlie Veitch has been got at by the Illuminati. And when BBC come out with this film, they're going to play some of those wacky videos, and they're going to go, look, truthers are nut jobs, and we're just going to look stupid. Why can't people just stick to the facts and stay rational? Why have they got to be... Well, it's the point I made. Charlie Veitch can say we're emotionally attached to 9/11. A lot of people are emotionally attached to Charlie Veitch. Now that he's been taken away from them, they're having all these hissy fits that are going to make us look absolutely ridiculous when the BBC plays them back on this documentary. And let's not forget, there's other people, other British truthers that are a part of this documentary. And who knows what, how they've made them look stupid. I mean, I remember the 7/7 conspiracy files thing, where they got Nick Colostrom, and he was the guy that first promoted the still image of the bombers going into Luton train station, I think, was fake. And it did, I'll give him that, it did look dodgy. If I saw that, I probably would have done exactly the same as he did. The bar going through the guy's face, all pixelated, looks like his legs hanging off. Just it did look like a dodgy image. But on this BBC programme, they managed to get the new CCTV showing them entering it in a moving image, and they made him look foolish. So these are the tactics that they're going to use. And so thinking that this Charlie Veitch thing is the worst of it, the worst is still to come. That's why we've got to use this as a kick up the ass to get back into the 9/11 research, to make sure we know the facts, so that when it comes to the 10th anniversary, we can go out there and spread the right information and not be intimidated by these hit pieces. Charlie Veitch does show up. Who the hell cares? Let's debate Charlie Veitch. Let's all bring our video cameras and make him look like the idiot. But, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that today. I mean, there's nothing anybody else can really say unless he comes out and says that he was mind controlled or something. But that's unlikely. What else did I want to mention? A quick update about some of my own projects. Of course, the 6th anniversary of the 7/7 bombings is this Thursday, and my film 7/7 The Big Picture is going to be broadcast on Sky Television on Paradigm Shift TV. So if you've still got a television and you haven't thrown it out your window or whatever, be sure to check out Sky Channel 201 and also 203. I'm not sure if they have broadcasting at the same time, but that's what it says on the website. 201 and 203. If you've got a free sat box, a bit like Freeview, it's channel 403. And in Europe, you can also catch it on a system called the Astro Eurobird satellite or whatever. And the frequencies for that can be found on paradigmshift.tv, the web address. But yeah, my film's going to be on TV. Awesome. Part 1 is going to be on July 7th, the actual day of the attacks, at 10 p.m. until midnight, and then part 2 is going to be airing the following night from 10 p.m. until midnight again, in between the Corbett Report and FKN News, which is pretty cool. As far as the new 7/7 film that I'm working on, it is coming along slowly but surely. Definitely better than the first film in terms of just general production and quality control. I've been a lot more sort of meticulous doing this one. And I've changed the name actually from 7/7 in question to 7/7 terrorism or treason, because the more I got into it, the less I was really focusing on the inquest because the inquest, a lot of the stuff in the inquest was just irrelevant, just rehashing the same old stuff, and then getting into like the emergency response. A lot of the big questions were not part of the inquest, so there was no point really focusing everything on the inquest. It's basically just a remake of the first film, a little more concise, a few more added details, but just generally a better film. And I've asked our own Lee Wood to get involved, doing a few of the voiceovers, you know, for quotations from news clippings and stuff like that. I think Lee definitely has that radio voice, which would suit documentaries, so I've asked Lee to come on board and do a bit of that. I've also asked Mr. Britt to film a few points for the camera to sort of help break up the narrative. But yeah, good things happening here at Resistance Radio. You know, as that guy said in the chat on Pal Talk, saying we're all unhappy and unfulfilled and stuff. No, I'm very happy and very excited that we're getting this information out there. So be sure to check all that out as and when. But for me this week, that pretty much wraps it up. I'll be in Pal Talk later. I'm sure someone will drop the link in. But other than that,